Digital art as a medium is one that's been surrounded by controversy since the beginning, with some people thinking that if you are a digital artist, you're actually cheating and what you're making isn't real art, to full-blown plagiarism scandals. Oftentimes, people that have the opinion that digital art is not real art have not ever tried using that medium, and as someone who has done both traditional and digital art, I feel like I would like to share some of my thoughts and opinions on that today. Let's address the idea that digital art is a way to cheat at art. Cheating is defined as acting dishonestly or unfairly in order to gain an advantage. Most of the time, if you are cheating, it's because you are secretly breaking a rule. Art doesn't really have a lot of rules. One of the main rules in art is just do not steal someone else's work or infringe on copyright. And as long as you're not doing that, it's really free game to do whatever you want to do, however you plan on doing it. Most people would not get mad at a traditional artist for tracing a bowl in order to get the correct size and shape circle. However, for some reason people would go and get mad at a digital artist for using one of the shape tools in Procreate or on Photoshop. Similarly, most people probably wouldn't get that mad at a traditional artist for using a lightbox to draw one of their own reference photos. But for some reason, a lot of people do get mad at digital artists for tracing their own reference photos. In that aspect, digital and traditional art is very similar. You can still trace different things and use different tools to help you get the effect that you want to. Another opinion that I've seen people share is that digital art cannot be real art because it is viewed as being easier than traditional mediums. I think that digital art is real art, and I don't think that we should necessarily be comparing it to oil paint and how easy or hard that is to work with, because the mediums are so different. But if we do have to compare digital art with traditional media and how easy it is to learn or not learn or use or not use, I think that I can discuss this a little bit because once again, I am both a traditional and digital artist. You are probably not going to like this answer, but how easy compared to traditional media that digital art is very dependent on the artists themselves and what tools that they're using. When I'm working on a traditional gouache painting, I usually spend 3 hours on it if I want to add a lot of detail. If I wanted to make that exact same painting in Procreate, which is the digital art app that I use to make my paintings, it's probably going to take me only about 45 minutes to an hour to make. The difference for me is that I have a lot of extra tools in Procreate that I don't have in real life. If you watch on screen, I'm looking at all of the different flower stamps that are brushes that I've downloaded, that I can just stamp those in and I don't have to individually paint in each flower using a normal brush. The difference for me is that when it comes to digital art, I have a lot more tools that help me speed up the painting process. I'm sure for traditional media, if I wanted to find flower stamps to use with my paintings, I probably could, or I could make them. But they're not as easy to find as maybe a digital art brush pack that has stamps in it. And that way, digital art is easier than traditional art. There are a lot more tools that can help you speed up the process, like these pre-made brush sets. There's also the fact that if you mess up, there's usually a backspace or an undo button that can get rid of that mistake. And there's also different layering options where you can draw something completely different on a different layer, and if you don't like how it looks, you can change it without affecting any of the rest of your piece. While those parts are easier than in traditional media, where if you mess up you have to either restart or paint over it or figure it out, there are parts that are a lot harder for me personally. For digital art, I really struggle to conceptualize the page size when I'm working on things, so I might make something entirely too big or entirely too small, and then if portions of it are out of proportion, I have to individually select everything and then resize them all and then puzzle piece them back together, and I'm not good at that at all. Whereas with traditional media, I know how big the page is. I know exactly how big it is and exactly how big I need to make things on it so that I don't have to change them constantly. Another thing to note is that if you are trying to replicate a traditional medium using digital brushes and tools, it is not going to handle or feel or look the same. There is a huge learning curve when it comes to replicating traditional media using digital tools. For me, I use watercolors and gouache for my traditional media, and so I've been trying to replicate those using digital tools, and it's been very hard, especially with the watercolor aspect, because the brushes that are supposed to replicate water and watercolor do not handle like water on a brush and watercolor paint. In a way, I feel like the reason why there are so many tools that help make digital art easy is because digital art is not actually easy. It's actually very difficult because it does not follow physics most of the time, like real-world traditional mediums do with oil paint or acrylic. With digital art, there is no drying time. There's also no adding water to your paint or adding oil to your paint. There's only changing the opacity or the hardness of things and trying to blend using brushes that also do not follow physics. I want to talk about tracing scandals really briefly. I think it's kind of ridiculous that if a digital artist is good at realism, that they are almost immediately accused of plagiarizing the reference image and not actually making that artwork. While it is probably easier to plagiarize and just trace over an image like that and claim it as your own if it's digital, than maybe it is with like traditional painting, I don't think that we should just assume that anyone that is good at digital art is automatically stealing the reference image and claiming it's their own. I have seen quite a few artists who are also using their Procreate time-lapse videos or the different layers on the Procreate app to prove that they didn't trace a reference photo, and I have a lot of feelings about that. First off, tracing is not a sin, it's not a bad thing. The only time that tracing would ever be an issue is if you're actually like plagiarizing someone else's work. So if they're tracing in general, that's not a problem. But if you are not someone who has used Procreate very much, you probably wouldn't know that those time-lapse videos and showing all of your layers of your drawing doesn't prove that you did not trace your reference image. Procreate has an option where you can actually insert a private image and it will not show up on your time-lapse video. And another thing is that if you had that private image, all you would have to do is open the layers and delete that layer before you take the video to show everyone. So there's not a really great definitive way of proving that someone did or didn't trace their reference photo. The only way that I could think of is by taking their photo and taking their drawing and overlaying them to see if they line up exactly. But even then, tracing is not a sin. As long as they're not plagiarizing someone else's work and saying it's their original design or their original drawing, there's not actually like a legal issue with that. That aside, I really like digital art. I think that it's cool to look at, and it's very handy if I'm traveling and I can't use like my traditional paints, so I could just use digital art instead. I also think it's a very helpful tool within traditional painting because I like to make a lot of my thumbnail sketches on Procreate and then use my iPad as a light box to transfer that image onto my paper. Please let me know, how do you feel about digital art? Have you ever tried it? Would you ever try it? Do you think that it's horrible in itself? Let me know. If you like the video, like the video. If you like my content, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.